President Prabowo Subianto has officially launched Indonesia's sovereign wealth fund and Daya Anagata Nusantara or Danantara. The fund is set to manage total assets worth approximately 14,700 trillion rupiah or 900 billion US dollars. Prabowo himself will directly oversee Danantara's board, and three key bodies will support the president in this role: the Advisory Council, the Supervisory Board, and the Oversight and Accountability Committee. The Advisory Council includes former President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and Joko Widodo. Meanwhile, State-owned Enterprises Minister Erick Thohir will lead the Supervisory Board, bringing his expertise in corporate transformation. Mr. Thohir is also a well-known businessman and sports team owner with strong management capabilities. Joining him is former Bank Indonesia Governor Mulyaman Haddad, along with ex-UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and Finance Minister Sri Mulyani, who will help steer Danantara's investment strategies. And at the helm of Danantara's operation is Investment and Downstreaming Minister Rosan Roslani. Roslani is known for his experience in investment and diplomacy. He will be supported by prominent entrepreneur and investor Pandu Syahrir as Chief Investment Officer. His expertise will be crucial in shaping Danantara's portfolio. Vice Minister of State-owned Enterprises Doni Oskaria will join the board as Chief Operating Officer to oversee the day-to-day operations. And let's take a look at Danantara's closer with Celios Economist Bhima Yudhistira joining us online. Mas Bhima, thank you so much for joining us here on See Today. So it's already announced, it's already launched. How do you think Danantara will contribute to our current economy conditions and maybe the future?
I think Danantara is a super vehicle in terms of the investment is very, very important because in the tight fiscal space, there is a lot of the infrastructure spending that need to be worked on, that need to be implemented, that a lot of the energy transitions project need to be done. So Danantara will be the answers, including the downstreamings of the critical minerals that's so important for the next of the electrifications, the next of the energy transitions, and also increasing value-added industry in Indonesia as well. So we think that Danantara is in the perfect time because the global economy, as we can see, that's not in the good shape. But with the Danantara, there is still a hope that maybe Danantara can work with the foreign investors to bring more investments in terms of the United Arab Emirates that will bring energy transition project, and also some country from the sovereign wealth fund in the Norway, in the climate investments frameworks. So a lot of the things to be done with the Danantara, and hopefully that this kind of a super investment vehicle consolidated a lot of the state-owned enterprise asset can be have a good performance compared with the state-owned enterprise that already exists today.
Very interesting. You mentioned earlier about how the economy is struggling at the moment. So 20 trillion rupiah to kick off the new sovereign wealth fund. How will it impact the economy? Will it boost us for the time being, or how do you see that 20 trillion rupiah will be invested for upcoming projects?
Yeah, I think the low-hanging fruit right now it's coming from the two things. The first one is about the energy project, the clean energy project that a lot of the sovereign wealth fund in the Middle East has long time ago searching for the right partners to be invested in Indonesia. As we can imagine that United Arab Emirates came on, and then Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they also interest for developing solar PV floating project in many of the lakes in Indonesia, and also battery saving storage. So we estimate that the energy transition project that maybe bring more than 80 million workers opportunities in the next 30 years from now. So it's very, very impactful for the economy, also impactful in terms of achieving net zero emission target, low carbon economy development. And I think this is kind of the new engine of growth. If Danantara can bring this kind of the investments into more realization, more faster permits, and more regulations that supported enable conditions of this energy project, I think that will be like a good achievement in very, very short term periods. And the second thing I think is about the housing project. Qatar have a MOU already, like a help 1 million house project. That's very, very good. And if Danantara can make more technicality supporting the infrastructures project with the help from the Middle Eastern investors, I think that's also can benefit a lot of the young generation in Indonesia that still cannot afford to buy houses. So there is a huge backlog of the houses currently happening in Indonesia. And I think Danantara can issues a lot of the investments instruments, including the joint venture company with the foreign investor, domestic investor as well, or they can use mechanism like issue like a bond that the collateral of the bond is made from project in the housing sectors. I think a lot of things can happen. A lot of instrument, a lot of innovative instrument can be done within like 2 or 3 months from the establishment of Danantara.
All right, so according to the Sovereign Wealth Institute, Danantara Indonesia will have the world's seven largest assets. Now, your take on this?
Yes, in terms of the asset, I think Indonesia can compete with the other sovereign wealth funds. But bear in mind that the asset itself is one thing. We have a huge state-owned enterprise like Pertamina, PLN, Mine ID is part of the Danantara, including state-owned enterprise bank. But we also need to leverage more how to put some project into more rate of returns in terms of the labor employment. So it's not only the asset that we're looking at on it, but also how to ensure that Danantara have a huge multiplier effect. How it also improving the welfare standard in Indonesia, improving the housing standard, housing affordability for the average Indonesian citizens, and also how to ensure that the good corporate governance in Danantara put in place. As we can see that many of the sovereign wealth fund, whether in the Middle East, in the Europe, in the Singapore, like a Temasek Holding, they have a very, very strict rules in the corporate governance. And I think that's kind of the things that Danantara need to be put on in every feasibility studies they're doing. They should insert corporate governance as the ultimate standard.
Interesting. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump mentioned a few weeks ago he will consider a U.S. version of the wealth funds. Now, what will happen if it occurs, and your take on this?
I think we're not in the position to compete with the US or any of the sovereign wealth funds because we think that US economy currently is not so in the good shape, especially when the Trump said that they want to do some efficiency, a lot of the fiscal policy changes, a lot of the trade wars, not only with China, but also with the other neighbor countries as well, like Mexico, Canada. And I think this kind of bring opportunity for Danantara. If Danantara can see that they're not competing against the Europe or US sovereign wealth fund, if any from the US, I think the opportunity is how to bring more investments coming from the US to Indonesia. For instance, that a lot of the companies in the first trade war during the Trump administrations, they see that the potentials of relocating of manufacturer sectors is in Southeast Asia. Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, even Cambodia. So apart from the threat coming from the US, I think there's a lot of the opportunity also to increasing number of the manufacturer from the China, also from the US to coming to help through Danantara building a strong domestic supply chains and also export supply chain of critical minerals, including nickels, tins, and also copper. So a huge investment is needed, and we don't need to worry about any kind of the Trump initiations to build their own sovereign wealth fund.
Now, you mentioned several things about like foreign investors coming into Indonesia, including Qatar and some other Middle Eastern countries. Now, When we're talking about GDP and economic growth, we're going to talk about job creations and then expenses here. What role does Danantara can play in boosting job creation and reducing unemployment across various sectors?
As a super investment vehicle, we hope that Danantara can do two things. The first one, I think, how to bring more investments. That the investment, the quality of investment is very important. Either they're going through energy transition project. We have a huge hydro potential here in Indonesia. We have solar PV, and also we have wind energy that's so abundant in Indonesia, ready to unlock, ready to untap. I think that kind of the investment can bring a job not only in the technological sectors, engineering sectors, but also help small medium enterprise and local community as well. In some area they still have energy poverty, they still have problems of access to energy. I think renewable energy project from Danantara, either joint ventures with the other sovereign wealth fund from the investors, any kind of the mechanisms that bring faster and big project of the renewable energy is welcome in Indonesia. The second thing, I think how Danantara also can help to ensure that some company that already established here in Indonesia but lack of a new investments, for instance, in the critical minerals, we see that the PTGNI or Gunbusters, which is one of the biggest players in critical mineral in Indonesia right now, they have financial difficulties, and I think using Danantara, they can like a business to business take over some of the majority shares of the gunbusters, nickels, and save the employee because they absorb more than 10,000 of the employee. So bring new investment is one thing, but also how to save current manufacturing sectors that also important. That's the objective of Danantara.
Oh, that's interesting that you mentioned that. Now, by like you mentioned, helping struggling companies like revamping factories or not just waiting for investment coming in from foreign investment. How do you like how long are we supposed to see the kind of the benefit from Danantara? Like when they invest in something, some kind of projects, can we see actually the return right away in like a matter of like a year or two, or are we talking about like another 5 or 10 or 20 years maybe?
Yeah, it's depend on the project itself. If the project in the saving existing critical mineral industries, I think the benefit already seen in the very short terms. You can see the benefit to saving employee from layoff, having a huge opportunity for domestic supply chain, but also if you using the Danantara or the government using the Danantara to absorb investment for farming and agriculture, which is our president is have a mission on that sectors. I think the impact will be eventually happening very soon enough. So any new investment in agriculture sectors just instantly bring new labor forces join the agriculture and food system. And I think that also very useful for us to achieve food securities. On the other hands, achieving free meals program affordability in terms of sourcing raw materials of the free meal programs, but also help young unemployed laborers in many of the village. They can find new hopes. So it depends on the sectors, but we hope that the low-hanging fruit right now is the energy sectors, housing sectors, and food agriculture sectors, which is the government already have so many incentive, so many support, so many banking facilities for these three sectors to be prioritized.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, at the moment, right now, what they're planning is actually to take some of the dividend from the state-owned enterprises and then put it on the Nantara, and then they're going to invest that. So when they actually recoup some of this money, can you give us an example of like what's happening, let's say Temasek or any other sovereign fund? Do they put that money straight back to the state budget, or do they reinvest it again in other companies or any other projects to actually gain more capital from there?
Yeah, Actually, if we learn from the sovereign wealth fund in many countries, for instance, in Singapore, the Temasek Holding. So in the beginning, yes, they get fund from the state-owned enterprise. They get funding from the state budget as well. But when there is a dividend coming from the state-owned enterprise to the Temasek, in the long run, because of the investments managements, they get a lot of the huge returns. So um, the other coming years, for instance, the Temasek Holding didn't receive a lot of the dividends coming from the state-owned enterprise, but because of their own initial capital, so they can get a lot of the new earnings from investment in property, infrastructure project. Even the Temasek Holding can help struggling state-owned enterprise. That also happening in the Norway Oil Fund. So the other case of the Norway Oil Fund. So when there is a crisis happening in the Europe during the 2008 and then 2013, the government get the money from the Norway Oil Fund to bail out some of the business that being hurt by the crisis. So in the beginning, that's fine. Dividend from the state-owned enterprise put on the Danantara, and then Danantara play some portfolio or manage some portfolio to get future investments. And we need to ensure that that kind of the project is profitable for Danantara. So at the end of the day, Danantara didn't need any new dividend from the state-owned enterprise. Danantara already independent, or in Danantara already can live by their own earnings. So that's the goals of the sovereign wealth fund.
That's actually that's very interesting. Now, some of the advisory, so one was interesting is the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair on Danantara. Now, how will his expertise and global influence contribute to Danantara's strategic vision and operation?
Yeah, Tony Blair is a very, very interesting figures because he has a lot of experience before as a prime minister in the UK from the Labour Party, but he also very much famous because of the consulting managements, helping a lot of the sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East, especially. So I think with his expertise, he can build more trust in terms of the investor perceptions that Indonesia Danantara is professional, Indonesia Danantara is linked with international standard, and perhaps Mr. Tony Blair also can help Danantara achieve higher standard like OECD due diligence, OECD business and human rights standard, environmental standard. So achieving higher standards means that can help build trust with the foreign investor that want to join venture with Danantara, that want to having a business with the Danantara. So that kind of the goal, having a externals advisor with the strong experience and background.
That's interesting. You mentioned externals. Do you see at the moment right now there's seven SOEs, state-owned enterprises that are actually going to be on Danantara. Eventually, it looks like they're going to gain more and more state-owned enterprises. Do you see any other companies outside of the state-owned enterprises will be part of the Danantara to help to make it more sustainable?
Yeah, well, at the moment it just seven state-owned enterprise, but that seven state-owned enterprise, including PLN, Pertamina, Mine ID, and state-owned enterprise bank, I think they already have a big chunk of asset. So that's need to be managed as well in the beginning. But if the government want to include all the state-owned enterprise, I think there will be more like a selective and more stages because it takes time to evaluate all the assets. Some assets are good, some assets are not. So I think still need a time to manage if Danantara want to include it every single state or enterprise to be part of consolidated asset of Danantara.
All right, Mas Bima, thank you so much for spending your time here on C today. That's very much helpful on talking about Danantara to give us a better idea of what has been done with sovereign wealth fund in other countries and what we can hope for if Danantara is actually properly executed. Thank you so much. Again, that was Bhima Yudhistira from Celios Economist for our today business talk. And that was our conversation about Danantara for today's Business Talk. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, X, and YouTube. Our handle is @CTodayNews. We are also available online at ctodaynews.com. Let's stay connected.